The man was reborn a month before the apocalypse, yet he sold stocks worth $3 billion for a mere $1 billion. He hoarded 1 billion tons of supplies directly, all because in 90 days, a global apocalyptic crisis will break out. 80% of humanity will turn into zombies. Of the remaining humans, 90% will die at the hands of zombies, and the small remaining portion of humans will begin to evolve and develop special abilities. Some have physical abilities, some elemental, and some are mental. In his past life he was betrayed by his girlfriend, Chu Jing. Our hero Jiang Xiaoyang is in a hanging state. Literally, he is hanging right above a cage full of bloodthirsty zombies, and his ex-girlfriend is laughing and mocking him, reminding that all his friends are dead. But he may not worry, soon his meaningless life will also end, and he can join his friends. Thinking back on what happened, Xiaoyang couldn't forgive himself for letting it all happen. It was all his fault, or rather, it was his fault for trusting this evil woman who deserved a miserable death. That's who the real villain here is. But for her, all the threats of our hero were not scary at all. She found herself a boyfriend, stronger and richer, and now asked him to deal with this garbage. The fat man was not at all against helping, and offered to torture Jiang Xiaoyang slowly, so that the girl could enjoy the sight, and let out her anger. Before pressing the button, the fat man mockingly thanked Xiaoyang for all his supplies. Thanks to his generosity, they would be able to live comfortably for a few months. That was the end of the conversation, and Xiaoyang fell right into the zombie cage. For these insane creatures, there was no difference in what to attack. Fresh flesh was the only thing they desired in this world. The bound Xiaoyang could only scream in pain, and dream that, if he had a second chance to live his life again, he would make his ex-girlfriend Kajing and Fatty Li Shu pay for what they had done. But suddenly, it was as if Xiaoyang woke up and heard Kajing's nasty disgusting voice demanding an explanation. She wanted to know why it was that he still hadn't put her name on the house deeds. Does he not love her at all? Xiaoyang meanwhile was trying to come to his senses, and realize what was going on. Had he been reborn in the time before the apocalypse? In his past life, he was deceived by Kajing. Not only did she swindle away the inheritance his parents left him, but he also ended up homeless. Later the apocalypse began, and a global catastrophe turned people into zombies, plunging the entire world into chaos. But even in the midst of this chaos, Xiaoyang was not confused, and with the help of friends managed to survive, and after some wandering built a safe zone. In it they could not be afraid of zombies, and thanks to good supplies, they could live there for months. That's when Qing appeared again. She pretended to be a desperate person who was looking for shelter, and she won Xiaoyang's sympathy again. Yes, it was stupid, and he realized it himself now. The very next night, she opened the gates of the safe zone to the enemies, who had long dreamed of destroying them. Now this same traitorous woman was not calming down, and demanded 400,000 yuan bride price, in addition to the house if he wanted to marry her. She behaved the same as always, confident that Xiaoyang was enchanted by her beauty, and couldn't see her rotten character. But this time it will be different. He won't let this evil thing twist him around. However, he needs to act carefully. Being overly impulsive could hurt him now. Kajing gave him a week's time to do what she demanded, otherwise the wedding would be cancelled. At this, Xiaoyang threw her out of the house, and assured her that he understood. Kajing was not used to such an attitude, and couldn't understand what was going on. Since when had her slave Xiaoyang become so assertive? Had he changed his mind about being her servant? Now that he was rid of that annoying traitor, he could look around. There was only a month left before the apocalypse began, and Xiaoyang had to start preparing immediately, or else it would be too late later. Suddenly he received a notification like in some kind of game. He received a system mission after activating the Apocalypse system. The mission had a very common name, Apocalypse Preparation. To complete it, he needed to own a piece of land and prepare a year's stock of supplies. For completing it, Xiaoyang could get 10 points, which he could exchange for rewards in the system store. Our hero was pleasantly surprised by such a bonus. The system, missions, and rewards for their completion. What else is needed for happiness? Just what could be bought in the system store Xiaoyang did not know. Mostly there were loot boxes, and some potions for example to improve physical strength. But from all this, our hero was distracted by his stomach grumbling and demanding a proper meal. Xiaoyang had almost forgotten how in his previous life, he was skimping and saving every penny to gather Kajing's bride price, which left him malnourished. Now he was not going to limit himself, and decided to have a fancy dinner delivered. In a month's time, zombies would be everywhere, and as long as good food is available, he should take advantage of it. A few hours later, the delivery arrived. Xiaoyang would never have allowed himself such a legendary Michelin 3-star takeaway before. He decided to start by tasting what a 300 yuan braised pork tasted like. After what he ate during the apocalypse, it was divine, and just too good to be true. Our hero didn't stop there, and went into food devourer mode. His appetite was quite good, and soon he was almost done. Just at this moment the phone rang. When Shuya, Chu Jing's friend, was calling, which meant that she had already managed to complain to her. Xiaoyong answered the phone and immediately regretted it. A shout immediately came from the phone, where Xia demanding to explain how dare he treat Chu Jing like that. She just wanted him to prove his love. If he can't give her his property, then how can he say he loves her? Actually, Chu Jing was just testing him a little and he failed the test. But if he brings the house deeds and 1,000,000 yuan in cash as an apology, then Wu Yao will try to help him convince Chu Jing that it was just a misunderstanding. If he doesn't, he can expect a breakup. After such a long speech, our hero simply ran out of patience. Who does she think she is to test him? With an attitude like that, she should just get lost. When Wu Yao still tried to object, but Xiaoyong just ended the call. He was already fed up with these money-hungry girls. He didn't care about them now. The most important thing was to find and buy a suitable piece of land. There he could build the strongest fortress, which would not only be easy to defend, but also close to a source of water and forest. The next morning, he arrived at the real estate agency. He was immediately greeted by a consultant, and asked if he had come to rent or buy a house. Xiaoyong assured her that it was neither. He was here for something more valuable. Suddenly a real estate sales manager came up behind them, and ordered the consultant Xiao Ning to go and help carry the boxes. They received a big shipment of toilet paper today. She tried to explain that she had a customer, but it was no use. Manager Zhu didn't see Xiaoyang as a customer at all. He even scolded his subordinate for forgetting everything he taught her. Convinced that you can't be a real estate agent without flair, he sent her to work in the backyard, and told our hero that such a broke loser in cheap clothes probably cannot even afford to buy a toilet, so he can't even be called a customer. This arrogant attitude annoyed our hero, and he was going to teach this manager a lesson. To start with, Xiaoyong asked him to repeat what he just said, and explain how dare he look down on the others. Manager Zhu was not going to back down. Confident in his power, he proudly declared that he was a man who looks down on dogs like our hero. If Xiaoyang could buy himself at least a toilet, he would eat shit. On live stream, one look at Xiaoyong was enough to realize that the manager would soon regret about his words. Well, since the manager said so himself, Xiaoyong advised him to make sure he would find some fresh steaming ones later. After all, our hero didn't come here today to rent or sell a house, but to buy land. All the customers around him were shocked. It was the first time they had seen someone rich enough to buy land. In that case, Miss Xiaoning invited him to sit down so she could give him a detailed introduction. Manager Zhu watched all this with gritted teeth, confident that anyone could talk, but when it came to payment, he didn't believe that Xiaoyang would be able to pay. Xiaoning provided our hero all the pieces of land available for purchase. He could view them while she would explain everything, but for our hero, none of that was necessary. He knew exactly what he wanted. Xiaoyong was going to name his requirements, and let her see if they had anything suitable. Xiaoyong wanted the land to be near mountains and water, preferably with running water. It would be ideal to have factories or large buildings. On the land to find something suitable, Xiaoning needed a little time, but then Manager Zhu came from behind again. He seemed to have a hobby of approaching from behind. He thought that the piece of land that fit all the requirements is located in the Eastern District. Xiaoning thought it was a bad idea. That place was the T-City land. There were many unfinished factories and pending projects there. Such property couldn't be sold to customers. Manager Zhu didn't think so. He still hadn't seen any customers here, and this loser with such high demands in his opinion was not here to buy land, but to make trouble. Xiaoyong didn't really care where the land was located, as long as it met his requirements. Incomplete factories were also not a problem, even on the contrary an advantage. After looking at the details, our hero decided that it was exactly what he needed. With the barbed wire, this place would be easy to defend, and unfinished factories would save a lot of money and time on construction, so he agreed to buy this land. He was ready to sign the contract now and pay for the purchase. Xiaoning was shocked. She couldn't believe that someone in his right mind was going to buy this land with unfinished factories, but still Xiaoyong stood firm, and even asked her to do it quickly, because someone here couldn't wait to eat fresh poop. Soon enough, Manager Zhu held the check in his hands and couldn't believe it was possible. This ragamuffin was able to pay 300,000 yuan for a land with abandoned factories. This was just crazy to him. Xiaoyong reminded him before he left that he had made the payment, and now it was his turn to perform. While Zhu is enjoying the process, Xiaoyong will send him a donation in Super Chat, so that he won't be so offended. The other customers started encouraging the fat manager to hurry up, because they had already started the stream. One just had a stomach that didn't feel good, but he promised that it would at least be fresh. Thus Xiaoyong had completed the first step of the system task. Now it was time to get to the second one. Xiaoyong had spent all the money to buy the land, and now he needed to figure out how to get money to accumulate supplies. When he was leaving the real estate agency, he was recognized by an old acquaintance, Li Shuxiong, and he immediately wondered what our hero was doing here. However, all these questions flew out of his head. When he saw what was going on inside, the staff and customers were forcing Manager Zhu to keep his promise, while he was desperately asking for help, and how much he didn't want to eat poop. Meanwhile, Kajing was painting her nails and enjoying life carefree. She got a call from Li Shuxiong and asked if she knew that Xiaoyong had come to the real estate company to buy land. Of course she didn't know, and was shocked at where he got so much money from. Li Shuxiong clarified that Xiaoyong had paid 300,000 yuan, probably the bride price money he saved. Now she was just furious that that bastard dared to use her money. Li Shuxiong advised her to calm down and not get mad, but rather go find Xiaoyong and ask him what was going on. But she was blinded by anger. She wasn't going to ask him anything. That bastard was using her money and she was going to expose him today. In the meantime, our hero had his own worries. Buying supplies and building a base required a lot of money to be found. All his peaceful musings were interrupted by a frantic knock on the door. It was Chu Jing along with her sister. She was still furious that he dared to spend her money. Xiaoyong still couldn't understand what she was talking about. Chu Jing, on the other hand, continued as she thought to expose him that he used the bride price money to buy land. That money belonged to her, and since he bought the land with it, it also belonged to her. Xiaoyong didn't even know how to respond to this crazy woman's claims. He finally decided to explain things to her in a way that even a dumbass like her would understand. He has a lot of money, but he's not going to spend a single cent on her. Besides, he knows about her affairs with Li Shuxiong. Chu Jing didn't understand what was going on, and how he even knew about her and Li Shuxiong. Her sister, seeing where things were going, suggested to everyone to calm down and solve this little misunderstanding between a couple. But Xiaoyong was not going to waste his precious time on these two. There is no misunderstanding here. Chu Jing is not his girlfriend, but a pathetic doormat of that old fatty Li Shuxiong. Right after that, he slammed the door in her face and told her to get lost. Just looking at her already annoys him. Chu Jing still couldn't understand how he knew. She and Li Shuxiong had always been very careful when renting rooms. Her sister didn't know about them either, and didn't understand why her sister didn't share such important information with her up front. Is she really dating that middle-aged man? Chu Jing assured that it was nothing serious. They had just rented rooms a few times. In such an out-of-control situation, they had no choice but to go home and come up with a new plan. That's all they could do, since her sister screwed up with Xiaoyong. When Xia herself was now not going to hold back, and wanted to charm Xiaoyong. After all, they are good sisters. The next day, Xiaoyong arrived on his land together with a construction crew. He wanted to rebuild one factory, and he was wondering how long it would take. After a detailed analysis, Foreman Li summarized that reinforcing the walls, building protective towers, installing Texas barbed wire, thickening the steel armored doors, and adding bulletproof glass were all time-consuming processes. But he was interested in one additional question. What kind of power had offended our hero that he needed to build such a fortress? Xiaoyang advised him not to ask too much, because knowing too much does not lead to anything good. Our hero just wanted to know how much it would cost to finish the construction in a month. Foreman assured him that it couldn't be done in a month. In that case, Xiaoyong knew many who were willing to do it instead. Foreman replied that the lives and well-being of the workers were worth more. This surprised our hero. He had first met Foreman with conscience, but it turned out that he was wrong. It just meant that there would be a lot of money needed. Xiaoyong asked him to tell him the price without delay. Foreman Li calculated that if they had to finish the project in a month, the workers would have to work around on the clock, so the cost would be 6 digits. The price was 20 million, and they wanted to get a deposit of 5 million yuan before they started construction, so they could start work right away. But this option was not quite suitable for our hero. He wanted them to start work right away, and he would transfer the money to them within a week. The construction company didn't have to worry that he wouldn't pay. If he couldn't, then that land would be theirs. Suddenly Xia appeared on the construction site. She defiantly hugged his arm and asked him what he was doing here. Xiaoyang was already sick of this rotten woman. In his previous life, she along with Chu Jing had forced him out of his parents' legacy, and this time he was willing to make her pay twice as much. All her attempts were useless. No matter how much she tried to act like a nice girl, he could see her rotten nature. She asked if this was the land he bought. It's such a beautiful view, and Xiaoyang probably wants to build a villa here, right? But whatever he builds here is none of her business. Seeing this attitude, she couldn't understand what was going on. Since when did that loser behave so strangely? Usually just her touch on his arm was enough to make him blush, and his heart starts pounding. But today, none of that worked. Instead, he indifferently turned away from her, and went to instruct the construction workers what they were doing wrong, and that the gate needed to be widened. When Xia couldn't afford to miss such a golden opportunity, since Chu Jing had ruined everything with her cheating, she should move her, and this land would become hers. Xiaoyang returned home and wondered how he could get more money. After he mortgaged the house to the bank, he only got a 3 million yuan loan. It wasn't enough to cover the cost of even the first phase of construction. Although if you thought about it that way, the apocalypse was inevitable anyway, and if he sold the house to a few people, it wouldn't matter. It was something that needed to be dealt with. Just in time there was a knock on the door. It was the damn annoying old man neighbor. He lived downstairs and his name was Grandpa Li. he was a rich old bastard. He owned the apartments on the first and second floor, and wanted to buy the third floor too, but Xiaoyong wouldn't agree to sell it. So this old man was doing all sorts of nasty things, painting the doors, scattering trash, bringing coffin, and jamming lock to the doors. He's been up to all kinds of dirty tricks, and now he's come to complain that Xiaoyong made noise last night by having a party here. Of course it was a deliberate lie. Our hero went to bed early last night and didn't do anything like that, but there was no point in arguing further. Xiaoyong knew that the old man wanted his house, so he pretended that he was fed up and gave up. Now he was ready to sell the house to the old man. The old geezer couldn't believe his ears, but Xiaoyong had a condition. He wanted to stay living in the house for another 6 months until he found a new place to live. But the old man must transfer 5 million into his account right now, so he could pay the deposit for the new house. If the old man doesn't agree to this condition, he can forget about the deal. The greedy old bastard couldn't let that slip away and agreed, but demanded to sign the contract so that Xiaoyong couldn't change his mind later. This was no problem for our hero. That old bastard would still die in his house when the apocalypse started. Once old Li transferred 5 million yuan, then in sum with the loan from the bank, Xiaoyong had collected 8 million. Now it's time to complete the second task, and get the reward. The biggest supermarket was perfect for this task. Xiaoyong began to diligently stock up on supplies for the year ahead. People around him looked at him as a mentally unstable guy, and preferred to stay away. Finally he dragged a whole bunch of grocery carts to the checkout line. People around him still didn't understand why he was buying so much stuff. They just laughed at him like he was just another fool, who believed in rumors about the apocalypse, and the end of the world, but their conversations didn't mean anything. The most important thing was that Xiaoyong had completed the system's task and received 10 points. Among all the options available in the system store, the protagonist's supply box was worth 10 points, and Xiaoyong didn't hesitate to use this opportunity, and decided to spend all the available points on this box. The purchase was successful, and he received this mysterious box. After opening it, he received a level 1 space ring that allowed him to use his own subspace of 500 cubic meters. Also inside this space, time stood still, allowing the items inside to not spoil. This was an incredibly successful gain. There was a reason why our hero had a good feeling about this box. The fact that the time inside the subspace stood still meant that he could even store fresh food inside, and it would never spoil. Along with the new item, Xiaoyong also received a new mission, 10 years of sustenance. For its completion, it was possible to get 20 points. But suddenly our hero was called by the supermarket security chief. He'd gotten word that some crazy guy was causing trouble. Turns out he knew Xiaoyong. The security chief's name was Yang Tao. He went to the same high school as our hero, and was the lackey of a local bully, who bullied the weak and feared the strong. In the past, he had extorted money from high school students for his boss, and Xiaoyong had frequent conflicts with him. Today Xiaoyong didn't expect to run into him here. Yang Tao demanded that our hero put all these things back where he got them from, otherwise he would not be kind to him. Xiaoyong replied that he still hadn't changed, and was still bullying the weak, but our hero was not going to return anything. He is a customer here, and he is always right. Is this really how customers are treated? Then Yang Tao demanded that Xiaoyong pay for the items right now, otherwise it would be his own fault for being cruel. After an hour, all the cashiers in the supermarket finally calculated the price of all the items, a total of 56,000 yuan. Yang Tao immediately demanded to pay, and our hero did not hesitate to use his credit card as a superhero weapon. The transaction was successful, and the security chief was shocked. He turned around, and was about to leave, accepting his defeat, but Xiaoyong ordered him to wait. Yang Tao didn't realize what he was doing, but it was simple. Yang Tao had been rude, and now our hero wanted a public apology, or else he would return all those goods. The security chief thought that he had gone too far, and was only looking for trouble. However, there were too many witnesses around. They saw everything, and fully supported our hero. They recorded everything on video, and threatened Yang Tao to make him famous all over the internet if he didn't apologize. Xiaoyong also promised that, if the apology was sincere enough, he would buy the goods here 10 times more. If Yang Tao didn't believe him, then he could bring the POS machine and our hero would show him his balance. Yang Tao couldn't believe it when he saw 7 million in the account. Xiaoyong only demanded to apologize, and then he would continue buying, while the security chief struggled with his pride. This battle was short-lived and he lost. The pressure was too high and he gave up and apologized. Passing by, Xiaoyong advised him not to be so thoughtless in the future, because you never know how the situation will turn out. Now Yang Tao put on a mask of benevolence and asked, why our hero buys so many things. Of course Xiaoyong replied it was none of his business. He was planning a big deal. In that case, Yang Tao knew what to offer. The items in this supermarket's warehouse were not enough. If Xiaoyong wanted to make a big deal, he should have found a wholesaler. And he just knew once, since he worked at the supermarket. It was Jiang Shen. He was currently in the wholesale business. He immediately called him, and happily told him that he had found a big customer for him.